No Motive Apparent by Jefferson, Farjeon, Detective Fiction Weekly, the 24th of September, 1927. You are quite right, said Crook, smiling. There is no rule in the matter of murdering, otherwise our job would be easier. Did the maid enter it this morning? Asked Detective Crook. Nothing has been moved, replied the local inspector. Hardly anything's being touched by your orders, I suppose? Yes, by my orders. Crook nodded and glanced round the study, at the overturned chairs, at the waste-paper basket lying on its side, at the heavy picture of a hunting scene that had come down from the wall and lay flat upon the floor, and at the splintered glass on the carpet. Does it look like suicide? Muttered the inspector. Unless the suicide of a raving lunatic, Crook observed. I don't suppose there was any insanity in Mr. Sherman's family, queried Crook casually as he walked across to the French windows. Is the room exactly as it was when the maid entered? The inspector asked. Keen, hard-headed folk should say. Lunatics don't make successful businessmen, then. Not to mince matters, you suspect foul play. Crook pushed open the French window and stepped out onto the narrow balcony. A dozen stone steps led down into the garden, arching over the kitchen area. It was in the kitchen area, battered by the stone, that Isaac Sherman had been found that morning. Crook had seen the body. It had not been a pleasant sight. Easy to throw oneself if you had a mind to, observed the detective. It's a nasty drop. Mr. Sherman had no troubles that I know of, returned the inspector. Hardly anything. He rose at 12, he added. Is there any reason to exclude suicide? We can't say for certain what time he died, observed the inspector. But it must have been after 10, because before that the servants would have seen him fall, or him. Mrs. Sherman sleeps on the other side of the house, so she wouldn't have heard. Wasn't Mrs. Sherman alarmed she didn't come to bed? Asked the inspector succinctly. Her story is that she spoke to him at Tenkt. Suppose he expected a visitor, Crook suggested, turning to the French windows. That does suggest a visitor. Any idea who it was? He questioned Mrs. Sherman about the front door and whether the servants had been about. No result, said the inspector. She hasn't any idea. The front door was bolted. Servants got down. That's interesting, you see. Inspector, that means our visitor couldn't have left by the front door if he'd murdered Mr. Sherman. He must have left by the French windows, and perhaps he came in by the same way, frowned the inspector. Believe me, this isn't really a nice case, Mr. Crook. Crook did not answer immediately. He walked round the room leisurely, then examined the French windows. He peered at the curtains and stopped. What about fingerprints? He inquired as he rose. Washed out. Can't trace anything useful in that line, grunted the inspector. Then let's try another line. How is Mrs. Sherman taking this? She seems dazed and upset. Of course, I mean humanly upset, not sensationally. Well, I can't say. She seems prostrated with grief, exactly. From the few inquiries I've made, I gather they'd got a good way beyond the honeymoon stage. Whom did you gather that from? The servants. Why then? Crook smiled. Mr. Sherman did have a trouble. Oh, but there is nothing special in that, argued the inspector. That's just the ordinary way of it, isn't it? A wife doesn't expect to sit on a husband's knee after 4 years. How long have you been married? Asked Crook, innocently. 8 months, but that's beside the question, replied the inspector with a sudden grin. Then let's get back to the question. You say this isn't suicide. Can you think of a motive for murder, if it actually is? Can you think of any friends who might be the murderer? No idea. Might it be? Perhaps a man wearing a brown coat with one button missing. "What?" shouted the inspector, then was calm the next instant. "Let's hear some more about that. I found this brown bone button beneath the curtain just now," smiled the detective. "First point to me, Inspector." The inspector advanced quickly and examined the button. His expression was a study. It was divided between professional delight at the clue and personal chagrin that he had not unearthed it himself. "Wonder how I came to miss that," he muttered. "Perhaps it wasn't there when you first looked," suggested Crook. "Perhaps it's off your coat." "Try again," growled the inspector. "We don't wear buttons like that. It might be one of Mr. Sherman's. More likely the mysterious visitors whose presence we merely assume from the evidence of a second wine glass," mused Crook. "Plus a button now," added the inspector. Acting on Crook's suggestion, they summoned the parlor maid. She was a tall, trim girl and, as the inspector whispered, the only member of the staff who had shown no signs of hysteria. When she appeared, the detective eyed her approvingly and decided that he could get straight to business. "I want you to answer a few questions, if you will," he began pleasantly. "Can you give me a list of the people who have called here during the last week?" If the girl felt any surprise, she concealed it. She knew her place, whether in the presence of her mistress or a police official. Yes, she thought she could give a list. Though, of course, it was difficult to remember everybody. There was Mr. Henderson. He came Monday. Who was Mr. Henderson? Oh, just a friend of the family. Then a lady came to tea, Mrs. Edwards. Then, on Tuesday, there were some relations from America. A man called on Wednesday about the new car. He came from Thompson's garage, and the vicar called on Wednesday too. Oh, and Mr. Henderson again. Then on Thursday. No one came on Thursday. Oh yes, Mr. Henderson came again in the evening. And on Friday, the man from the garage came again. With Mr. Thompson himself this time, and the American relations came to tea, and Mr. Price, the solicitor, and Mr. Battersby. Who was Mr. Battersby? He was Mr. Sherman's partner. He came again on Saturday with his wife for a game of tennis. Did Mr. Sherman play tennis? Asked the detective. No, he never played, replied the maid. Golf was his game, but Mr. Sherman played tennis. Was there no fourth player on Saturday then? Oh, yes, Mr. Henderson. That's all I can remember. Sir, you have remembered very well, said Crook approvingly. Now, see if you can remember something else. Can you recall whether any of these visitors wore a brown suit? The girl thought. Once she even closed her eyes, as though to visualize some elusive visitor watching her. Crook was satisfied that her methods were very thorough and that her reply would be conclusive. While the inspector fidgeted, he waited patiently. At last, the maid spoke. Well, that's funny, sir, she said. You'd think there'd be plenty of brown suits. But, as far as I remember, none of them was wearing brown. All blues or greys. She stopped suddenly as a figure crossed the lawn. Well, silly of me. Except Mr. Henderson, of course. Is that Mr. Henderson? Inquired Crook quickly. Yes, sir. He generally wears a brown suit, but he's not yet one now. As the maid's brain worked, and she answered the questions rapidly, she hesitated. He generally comes round the garden, answered the maid, a little surprised. A special privilege, eh? Where does he live? The maid gave his address. Half a mile distant. Has he been here before today? Yes, sir, soon after breakfast. Whom did he ask for? The maid hesitated for a second, then answered. Mrs. Sherman asked him to come through the garden. He came then, too. He came to see Mrs. Sherman. Did Mr. Henderson enter this room or make any attempt to? He didn't enter this room, I can tell you that, returned the maid. And if he'd tried, it wouldn't have been proper. He doesn't do that. He's strictly decent until I return, and you can rely on that. The maid's tone was low and repressed. Crook looked at her a little more closely. What makes you think you may have? He asked. The girl did not reply. You've only answered my questions, and answered them well. You haven't incriminated anybody. Then the maid lost control of herself. It couldn't be him! It couldn't be him! She exclaimed. He's much too... She stopped as though fear sealed her words. Who? Asked Crook, but the maid had recovered. I beg your pardon, sir, she answered rather stiffly, if you'll excuse me. Crook did not press the point, but he cogitated over the maid's little outburst as he left the house. She's afraid for Mr. Henderson, he reflected, and she cannot conceive him to be guilty. Now, is she afraid for him merely on account of my questions, or does she think his relations with Mrs. Sherman might prejudice him? That may be so. On Mr. Henderson's side, we have the faith of a maid who appears to have more than the usual share of sanity. I'll remember that, Mr. Henderson. 20 minutes later, the oak door of Mr. Henderson's flat was opened to Detective Crook by that gentleman's butler. The visitor asked for Mr. Henderson, and affected mild surprise and disappointment on learning that he was out. That's unfortunate, said the visitor. I am from Graydon and Herishaw's, and Mr. Henderson asked me to call about making him a new wardrobe, slightly larger than the one he has. I expect he told you. It's the first I've heard of it, returned the butler rather suspiciously. Well, and I've made a journey. I wonder if you could just show me the wardrobe. I could get some idea and might not have to come again. The butler looked harder at the visitor and intimated that the business could be done. But he kept very close to the detective's heels all the time Crook was in the flat. Ah, so that's the wardrobe, exclaimed Crook, when he had been ushered into the bedroom. A nice piece that, a very nice piece. I really can't see what he wants with a bigger one. Though, of course, it's not in the interests of my firm to dissuade Mr. Henderson. Perhaps. He swung open the wardrobe door and nodded his head. That explains it. Mr. Henderson has rather a large outfit, hasn't he? I wish I could afford half as many suits. He dived his hand in among them, an action which brought a frown to the butler's face. What's that for? He demanded. Yes, they go all the way back, murmured Crook to himself. Probably the same width would do, but a little greater depth. Yes, thank you. He closed the door. By the way, I'm not surprised that it takes some doing to keep such a large wardrobe in repair. Nothing broken, is there? Asked the butler. I meant the case of the wardrobe. Before your master comes home, someone had better sew on the missing button of his brown suit. Crook chuckled at his little joke, but the butler did not see any humor in it. I'll tell Mr. Henderson you called, he said shortly. Very nearly called last night. Would I have found him in? No, he was out, replied the butler. He didn't come in till after 11. He might have been in by then. I don't say not, admitted Crook amiably. That's why I didn't call. On his way back, Detective Crook's face grew grave and thoughtful. Well? Exclaimed the inspector, meeting him at the front door of the late Isaac Sherman's house. Have you been able to find anything? I have traced the home of the brown button, answered Crook. Where? Wait till we're inside. In the study once more, the inspector repeated his question. Where is the home of the button? He demanded. On Mr. Henderson's brown coat, now hanging in his wardrobe, returned Crook. Ah! The inspector's eyes glowed with gratification. We're getting on. Mr. Henderson must have been here last night. It looks like it. Looks like it? Is that all? Now, it's rather odd that Mr. Henderson hasn't mentioned his visit. Where is he now?" The inspector looked grim, still with Mrs. Sherman comforting her. "Staying to lunch, I take it?" "You'd think she'd be lying down prostrated, wouldn't you, after 4 years, Inspector?" reproved Crook. "Perhaps the oddest thing is that a murderer should remain so close to the scene of the tragedy." "No, that's not odd," retorted the inspector. "People who murder, normal to begin with, you never know how they'll act. They may fly, they may stay, held by a sort of fascination or by a belief that the police won't see what's right under their nose." "You are quite right," said Crook. "There is no rule in the matter, otherwise our job would be the better. This is not going to be pleasant, but it's got to be done." Henderson received the summons with a frown. He told the maid who brought him the official request that he would be in the study in 2 minutes, and he went to Mrs. Sherman when the maid had delivered the message. "I wonder what they think I can tell them," he asked. "I don't know," answered Mrs. Sherman dully. Her face was pale and her eyes heavy with unshed tears. "I suppose they'd question everybody, wouldn't they?" "Yes, I expect so, but surely they know." "Know what, Fred?" she faltered, her frightened eyes upon him. He colored slightly and turned away. The next moment he was by her side. "Don't worry, my dear," he whispered. "Keep up your courage. All this will soon be over." He bent down, hesitated, and then, in response to her unspoken appeal, kissed her. Then, gritting his teeth, he left the room and joined his inquisitors in the study. "I understand you wish to speak to me," he said. Detective Crook regarded him quietly for a second. He saw a well-set-up man of about 35, with keen, rather haggard eyes, and a pleasant manner. There was external evidence of great strength or great weakness. If one woman saw everything in him, the majority would not have noticed him in a crowd. "We want you to help us solve the mystery of Mr. Sherman's death, if you can," said the detective. "Will you sit down?" "Any mystery, then?" "You think not? It was suicide, surely." "You are not suggesting anything," interposed the inspector. "You were with Mr. Sherman last night." "What's that?" cried Mr. Henderson, jumping up. "I was not. I was at home." Then he sat down again rather weakly. He knew he had made a slip and was wondering whither it would lead. "Oh, then I must have been mistaken in my conclusions," proceeded Crook. "Mr. Sherman had a visitor that we know. There were 2 glasses. One you see on the table by your side. The other lies on the floor, broken." Mr. Henderson followed the detective's gaze, fascinated. "We conclude that the visitor may have come by the French window, and that, if he murdered Mr. Sherman, murdered him." Moisture rose to Mr. Henderson's forehead. "He must have left by the same way, because he could not have let himself out of the front door and bolted it afterward. The reason we thought it might be you." "Mr. Henderson," added Crook, "was because your butler says you were not at home last night. He told me so himself less than an hour ago. And also because we found this on the floor by the curtain." He produced the button. "It is the button missing from your brown suit, now hanging in your wardrobe." Mr. Henderson stared at the button and did not speak for a full minute. Then he smiled. But it was not a happy smile. "You know your job," he said bitterly. "Are you accusing me of having killed Mr. Sherman?" "Not till we've heard anything you may have to say." "Isn't that right, Inspector?" said Detective Crook. The inspector nodded. Another minute went by. All at once, Mr. Henderson clenched his fist impotently. "The devil of it is," he burst out. "If I had killed him, there'd have been a motive." Crook frowned. "Don't you want to let us find that out?" he inquired. "No, by God, I don't." Mr. Henderson now showed something of the strain police do to a man dragged out of his life. "The quick way will be to tell you now. I've tried to keep this quiet for Mrs. Sherman's sake. Not for mine, but I see you will have it. You are not bound to say what you know," the inspector reminded him. "Thank you, Inspector. Isn't that what they tell a man after they've arrested him?" "Well, that doesn't matter. The simple truth is that I am in love with Mrs. Sherman, and she loves me. But, as God is my judge, we've done no wrong. One can't help one's feelings, but one can prevent oneself from giving way to them and being a cad." "I admire you for your candor, Mr. Henderson," said Crook, "and, if I may say so, I think you were adopting the right tack." "Did Mr. Sherman know of this position?" "He must have. It wasn't till last night, though, that I realized it." "What happened last night?" "He asked me to come and see him here in this room at 11 o'clock. He said it was some private matter, that I was to let no one know, and that I could come through the gate. Perhaps foolishly, I came." "Why foolishly?" "Well, I half guessed what was in the wind. That was why I obeyed his request to secrecy. Mr. Sherman was an ugly man when roused. Oh, but never mind that. The point is, I came. No one saw me come, I think. There was something odd in Mr. Sherman's attitude. I noticed it at once, but I couldn't make it out. We had a glass of wine together. I couldn't well refuse. And then he suddenly laughed, a beastly laugh, and he taxed me with having betrayed his wife." The speaker paused and covered his face with his hands. Then he raised his head again and continued more quietly, "Yes, I was angry. No, I didn't kill him, but I almost believe I could have. You don't know Mrs. Sherman, her patience and her purity. And when he made his foul suggestion, it was as though he had grabbed a button from her dress. It was all very quick. We both sprang up. We faced each other. And then I realized that I might do him some serious damage if I stayed, and that it would all react upon Mrs. Sherman. So I turned on my heel and left him. And this morning I heard that he had committed suicide." "Why didn't you admit having been here?" asked Crook. "Were you afraid you might be connected with his death?" "No, I never thought of that. It seemed too ridiculous. I accepted the theory of suicide." "Then your reason was to keep Mrs. Sherman's name out of it?" "I didn't want any chance that the subject of our interview would get around." "I see. Were you surprised to hear of the suicide?" "I was staggered," said Mr. Henderson frankly. "I couldn't find a motive in it." "Mr. Sherman wasn't the sort of man who would take his life, in my estimation. Do you think, Mr. Henderson," Detective Crook said quietly, "he was the sort of man who might have been prepared to take the life of another person?" "I don't understand," answered Mr. Henderson, and he glanced sharply at Crook. "What's that mean?" he demanded. "I'll tell you in a minute." "Meanwhile, did your struggle with Mr. Sherman knock over all these chairs, Mr. Henderson, and bring that big picture down?" "Why, of course not." "And if you had thrown Mr. Sherman out of the window after a struggle of that sort, you would surely have had the sense to straighten the room a little so that it might have looked like suicide." "I don't know. I really don't know," Crook smiled. "Perhaps you don't, but I know it was the first thing I thought of when I saw the state of the room." "He might, if he wanted it to appear murder," said Crook. "And if he were not in a mood to think very clearly. If he wanted, for instance, to make it appear that his rival, whose button he possessed, had killed him." Both the inspector and Mr. Henderson blinked uncomprehendingly. "Can you remember exactly what happened, just before you drank your wine?" asked Crook. Think hard. Nothing special happened, replied Mr. Henderson. Well, I do remember that, just before we drank, Mr. Sherman turned away for a moment to put the decanter aside, and that I vaguely wondered whether I'd taken up the right glass. You didn't take the right glass, answered Detective Crook gravely. You took the wrong glass, and Mr. Sherman drank the poison he had intended for you. Good God! Gasped Mr. Henderson. But Mr. Sherman was found in the kitchen area with a broken head, cried the inspector. What are you driving at? This, said Crook. Mr. Sherman did not discover his mistake till after Mr. Henderson had left. The poison was probably a slow one, designed to kill Mr. Henderson when he had returned home. This, if the visit had been kept secret, would have diverted suspicion from Mr. Sherman. On the other hand, it was unlikely that Mr. Henderson would be thought to have gone to Mr. Sherman's house deliberately to poison him. He would not know he was going to be offered wine, and the purchase of the poison could not have been traced to him. So, in order that an impulsive murder should be deduced, Sherman disarranged the room to suggest a scuffle, and then threw himself out of the window. That would take some courage, commented the inspector. I think I myself might prefer it, answered Crook, to the torment of death by poison. There was a long silence. Suddenly, Mr. Henderson's voice broke the stillness. May I go? He said hoarsely. After he had gone, the inspector turned to Crook. How the devil did you get onto it? He demanded. By not being in too much of a hurry to put two and two together, as you and the others did, answered Detective Crook. Mr. Sherman's isn't the only poisoned body I've seen in my time. Come and have another look at it. End of No Motive Apparent by J. Jefferson Farjeon.